Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar about what is Drupal. It'll be a very high-level overview of the Drupal content management system. So thanks for joining me today. As an introduction, my name is SUZANNE and I work at Evolving Web. We're a Drupal development company based in Montreal, and we do design and development of all sorts of Drupal websites. Just to give you an idea, we work with a lot of different types of clients. We work with some government agencies, some nonprofits, for-profit companies, and also some universities and public organizations. So as you'll get a sense of today, Drupal can really be used for a lot of different types of organizations, and that's why we have such a wide range of clients that we work with. So we work in the Drupal sphere, and we do a lot of different types of services, and that can be anything from customizing the back end of the site to creating some custom functionality for the front end, or integrating Drupal with third-party systems. We also run a Drupal training program, and I'll talk about that a little later in the class, but we have some upcoming trainings for Drupal 8, both beginner training, kind of an intro Drupal course, as well as more advanced training. And we do that both in person, and we also have some online courses. And me, myself, my name's SUZANNE, and I work as a Drupal trainer, but I also co-founded our company, and I manage a lot of Drupal projects and work as a themer and site builder on certain projects. So to get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is Drupal, but also why Drupal exists. So you might have heard the word Drupal around, if you've been looking for a tool for building your website, or maybe you have a website and you realize that it's made with Drupal, and you want to know what is this Drupal thing and why is it being used for your website. So to start with, I want you to think of all the websites you visit just in your day-to-day life in browsing through the internet. And you've probably noticed that websites are all pretty similar. So there's a lot of common patterns that you'll see from one website to the next. So websites usually have some kind of logo in the top left-hand corner. They often have big images that are used to brand the organization or to market to the consumer. They'll often have a menu that links to other pages on the website. They'll often have features like lists of content, maybe a list of news, or in the case of a lot of these screenshots, we have lists of products. And a lot of the time, those things will be maybe styled a little bit different, but the actual functionality will be the same. So we see these patterns as we visit websites. And that means that when you're building a website for the first time, you're often making a list of features that you want or content that you want to display, but you're not the first one to make a website. And you're probably not the first one to make a website that's similar to your website. So rather than just starting from scratch and designing the whole thing yourself and building the whole thing from nothing, you can start with an existing tool. So that's why Drupal exists. And it's not the only tool out there. There's lots of other platforms you've probably heard of, like WordPress or Joomla or SharePoint, but it's one of the options. So some examples of things that websites tend to have. So it's likely that the website you're trying to build or the website that you already have has some of these features. So most websites have a header. It often has the logo in it, sometimes the name, the slogan of your organization. Sometimes it'll have a little about paragraph. There's often also a footer, which sometimes has your contact information and maybe a map of where your office is. That's a really common thing. We often have navigation on our website. So I'm talking about things like menus. So you might have a link to your About Us page in the menu, and that will be part of the navigation system. Of course, you'll have pages of content. So most websites are more than one page. So you'll be able to click through to other pages that display information about your organization or that list other pieces of content. You might have things like articles and events listed on your website, and you might have a search form so people can find content more easily. Most websites have URLs, so that means that you don't just have one page that contains all the information. You actually have links that go through that your users can bookmark or come back to, or that will be indexed by Google. And so sometimes those URLs are formatted a certain way, and that's a really common pattern for websites too. And then a lot of websites have a contact page. So a page that either lists your contact information, or sometimes it'll even have a form in there that users can use to contact you. And this is just a starting point, right? So I'd say most websites have these things, but there's other really common features too. So if you're looking at an e-commerce website, you might also have products and a checkout page. Or if you're building an events tool, you might have a calendar. So of course there's some variation, but there's also all these things that are very, very common. So at the same time, while websites are all similar in a lot of ways, websites are also really different. So when you look at all these pages, you might not see the pattern at first because the design of them is so different. So on all these websites, there's a different logo, the colors are different, there's different content there, of course, and then also just the order in which things appear are really different. So although there's patterns, there's also a lot of really important differences, and this is what makes your website interesting. Like if there weren't differences between websites, we would all just use the same kind of template and publish our information the same way. So when you're planning your website, it's important to think about these differences and plan for them. So typically when you're building a website, you'll be thinking of the marketing materials you already have for your organization. So you might already have some branding and colors that you want to use. You might have lists of products with special features, like special aspects of what you're selling that you want to publish. You might have some really unique content, like maybe you're a school and all of your courses have really specific information that you want to put out there online. Sometimes you'll have really customized search features that you want to have, like you want people to be able to search your courses by a certain course ID or by a certain department or faculty or something like that. So you might have really specific features that no other website has. There might also be illustrations or graphics that you're using that you want to integrate into your site. You might have certain landing pages for campaigns that are really unique that you want to highlight. And you might also want to highlight the content that's most important on the site. So if you have some upcoming event that's really important, you might want to put that at the top of a page. And that might be something that's really unique to your site. The logic behind that is just really customized. You might also have target audiences that you want to be able to reach out to, and so there might be specific ways that you want to communicate to those audiences. So you might want to organize your site in a really specific way. So even though your site is similar to other sites, there's also all these unique things that you want to consider and that you want to be able to customize. So it's probably not enough just to have a template for a lot of sites. You actually want to be able to customize things. So that's where Drupal comes into play. So I think the reason that a lot of people decide to use Drupal is because they have a website they're trying to build. Maybe it has a lot of these really common features that are shared by by many websites, and Drupal comes with a lot of those features. But Drupal also gives you a level of flexibility so that you can add all of your customizations as well. And it makes it pretty, not always easy to do that, but it makes it straightforward. So it's built to be very flexible, and it's built to be extended in a lot of ways. So some features of Drupal 8 that you might already be aware of these, but just to go through them to give you kind of an idea of what you're going to get. And I say Drupal 8 because there's a lot of things that Drupal 8 does out of the box that Drupal 7 doesn't necessarily do. So depending on which version you're looking at, some of these features might not be there when you first install Drupal. But if you do have an install of Drupal 8, these are some of the things you're going to see. So you have, first of all, content management. So what does that mean? Because content management is a really common used phrase. So content management is a way of publishing content on your website, which when you think about it is kind of the most common thing that you're doing. So even if your website is just a simple blog, you're going to be publishing blog posts. But content management means a lot more than that. So with Drupal, it's really easy to add different types of content on your site. And that's what content management means. So it's not just blog posts or basic pages. You might also have really customized types of content like courses and programs, or like a portfolio item for your photography website. Drupal 8 also has a way of categorizing content, so that's called the taxonomy system. So you can add tags or categories or whatever you need to organize that content. There's a really flexible navigation system, so you can link to your content from a menu. Drupal does have comments, so you can build blogs and discussion forums. There's a built-in search tool to make it easier for people to find your content. Content listings. So if you've ever heard of views, when you read about Drupal, views is just a way of building lists of content, which is really important and really common for a lot of websites when you think about it. So whatever website you have in mind, there's surely going to be some content listings there, whether it's upcoming events or news or whatever it is. Contact forms, self-explanatory. A WYSIWYG editor, so a way to edit your content visually. There's a pretty nice authoring experience, so you can create new content pretty easily and publish it or unpublish it. There's also, and this is really important to a lot of us, an interface for creating multilingual content and for translating everything on the site. User management, so that means you can have different accounts on the site, different types of users. There's a lot of accessibility features built into Drupal 8, so if you want to make sure that everybody can use your site, whether they're using a screen reader or a browser or any kind of device, accessibility is important for ensuring that. And then responsive design. So if you just want to make sure that your site is going to work on mobile devices and other kinds of devices, then obviously you want it to look good across all those tools. So Drupal 8 is a tool that you can install, and as soon as you've installed it, you're going to have all these features. So the administrative interface of Drupal, it looks something like this. So it can be a little overwhelming at first. And I think this is what turns some people off of using Drupal, and some people are looking for maybe a tool that's a little easier to use. But I'm just going to give you a little tour of the admin UI that Drupal gives us. So I'm just going to bring up my browser here. And this is not going to be a full-fledged tour, but I just want to give you an idea of what Drupal looks like once you've installed it. So if you haven't gotten to that step yet where you're installing Drupal, here's what you can expect to see. So first of all, when you open up Drupal and you're logged into your site, you're going to see this toolbar appear up at the top. So this is called the toolbar, and it's used for accessing all the configuration pages and finding content and all those things. So you only see this toolbar up here when you're logged into the site. I think I'll just make this a little bigger here. Okay, so when we're logged in, we see the toolbar, and the first thing that appears here that you might want to click on is content. And this shows you an overview of all the content that you're creating on the site. So when you first install Drupal, it's going to be empty, but you can easily go here to add new content as well. And that's going to give you this choice, article, basic page. These are content types. And if you're customizing the site more, you're going to be probably adding more content types. So you might have, again, if you're creating maybe a university website, you might also have things like courses, instructors, programs, faculties, things like that might be listed here. And so under content, you're really creating pieces of content. So if you click on article, you're actually creating a new piece of content that's going to be published on the site. So this is the interface that authors are going to use every time they create a new piece of content. So for articles, there's certain fields here, but if you're adding, say, a course or a program, then this would be customized to show different fields. Over on the right, there's some settings, which I won't get into now, but basically you can customize a little bit how the content is used on the site. So that's content, where we're managing pieces of content. Structure is where you're kind of deciding how all the content is going to be organized on the site. And this is where the Drupal interface maybe gets a little overwhelming because there's a lot of new terminology that we see here. But the basic idea is that once you have some content on your site, you have to tell Drupal where you want that to show up, or maybe you want to tell Drupal to list the content on the home page, or you want to categorize the content in a certain way, or link to it in the menu. And so all of that takes a bit of configuration because you have to tell Drupal where to put things. So that's what this structure page is for, and there's lots of, I'm going to talk about some of this terminology a bit later, blocks, taxonomy, views, but the basic idea is that this is where you tell Drupal where to put stuff on the page. There's also this appearance page, so this is where you're actually deciding what the look of Drupal should be. There's this default look here called Bartik, but if you want to change the design used for Drupal, there's other options. Extend, I'll talk about modules a little bit, but this is where you can find your list of modules. And then configuration has a lot of other options. So, I mean, some of this configuration is going to seem intimidating the first time you look at it, but just keep in mind when you first install Drupal, I would start maybe with going in, adding some content, and just playing around with that and seeing how that works. So for example, I'll just create one piece of content just so you can see this. So I'm going to make a new test article. Here's some text. I can type in some tags. And I could even upload an image. And then when I click save, I get this new piece of content. So this is the typical workflow for creating new pieces of content on the site. And these pieces of content are also called nodes. So that's your first Drupal terminology for the day. An article or a page or any piece of content is called a node in Drupal. Okay, so I'm just going to get back to the slide. So you get an idea of what Drupal looks like when you log into a Drupal site as an administrator. So we saw a lot of terminology when we logged in. We saw a lot of labels on things that might not make sense. So I'm just going to try and give you some examples of these things now. So one really important piece of terminology for any Drupal site is node. So node is a piece of content, and every node has a URL you can go to see that content. So this could be a blog post, a course, a page, a product, a service that you're offering. So anything on your site that has a specific page associated with that content. You also have content types. So content types are basically templates for your content. So not every piece of content is going to be the same. Articles might need to have an image, and you might want to have comments on them. Whereas regular pages, you might just want to have some text and a more simple kind of layout. So different content types are going to be treated differently on the site. So you can just think of content types as being templates for your content. And you can customize them, which is great. You're also going to hear a lot in Drupal about taxonomy. So taxonomy just means the way that you categorize your content. So if you have, 20 pages on your site, you probably don't need a lot of categorization. You're probably just going to publish the pages, and people are going to see a link to the page and they're going to click on it. But if you have hundreds of pages or thousands of pages, lots of pieces of content, you're probably going to need a better way to organize things. So taxonomy gives you that. So you might have different, for example, for courses, you might have different topics that your courses cover. So that would be one way you could categorize your content. You're also going to hear about views. A view is a list of content. So this could be lots of things, anything from a list of recent news that you're putting on your homepage. It could be a calendar of events. It could be a grid of products if you have an e-commerce website. So there's really lots of ways that you can use this tool, but basically views gives you the ability to list content. So on any website you've looked at, I'm sure that you've seen listings of content. And so this is how you can build that with Drupal. You're going to hear the word module a lot when you start to read about Drupal, or the piece of functionality that you can add to a Drupal site. And so it's going to add some new feature to your site. So something like if you wanted to add in ratings for your content. So if you want to have recipes and you want to let users rate them, there would be a module for that. Or if you wanted to add videos, you might need to add a module to integrate with YouTube. So that's just an extra piece of functionality that you're installing on your site. The theme is for changing the layout, the look and feel, the branding of your site. So if you want to change the colors, you want to change the typography, you're going to be talking about maybe changing the theme or customizing the theme. A block, this is really important. So once you have a theme, you kind of have a layout of your site, but you need a way to move things around. So maybe you want to have that list of content on the left side of the page, or you want to have a slideshow at the top of the page. Maybe you always want your main navigation, like with your About Us and your Contact Us link. Maybe you want those to sit in the top right-hand corner. And so you can change the display of content on your page by moving blocks around. So when you hear about a block in Drupal, it's just something that's displayed on the page, and you can move it around from one side of the page to the other. So you can have blocks in the header, blocks in the footer, and it really makes Drupal very flexible using blocks. So nothing gets displayed on the page without a block. That's the basic idea. They're the basic building blocks of your website. So then we also have roles in Drupal. So roles are for different types of users. You might have authors on your site, or you might have editors. So you might also have, if you have a really complicated site, you might have many types of users. And so those can all be set up using roles. And then the way that you customize what users can do, it's using permissions. So the word permission in Drupal, it just means a task that a user can do. So if you want to be able to add a comment to the website, you need to have a permission. So permissions are very easy to customize. You can have a lot of control over what different types of users can do. So that's your Drupal 101 terminology. There's quite a bit of other terminology, but I think if you get familiar with these terms, then when you go to read about Drupal, you're going to be a lot more comfortable. So I am going to give you, I'm going to mail out a link to these slides afterwards, so this might be a page you want to come back to and just review. Okay, so now you know a little bit about Drupal, but you're still wondering, like, is Drupal the right tool for what I'm doing? What can you actually build with Drupal? So there's lots of answers to this question. There's many different types of websites you could build, or web applications. So I'm just going to give you a few common examples. If I don't list something that sounds like your website, it doesn't mean Drupal can't build it, but I'm just giving you some examples to get you familiar. So to start with, really common example is a corporate website. So a lot of websites, they might do other things, but a lot of websites are corporate websites. So when I say a corporate website, I mean like a website for a business that's communicating what the business does and what its services are, maybe what products it offers. And that just gives you an idea of what it's doing. So it's sort of a promotional kind of website. So often a corporate website has landing pages for key audiences. So for example, here we see a screenshot on the right side of the page, and there's these 3 links for businesses, for developers, for consumers. So these are different audiences that the corporation's targeting. And so each of those, for each of those, you might want to build a special kind of landing page that has information for those users and that really speaks to them. Corporate websites sometimes need a workflow for publishing content or scheduling content. So if you have a lot of people creating content on the website, you might want to make sure that it's correct before it gets published. So it needs to be approved. So that's something you can build with Drupal. You might also have to build different types of content on the site. So you might use those content types to create different pages for services. Maybe you have conferences you're organizing, so you could list those on the website. And you might also be issuing press releases. So you might want to create a content type for that, so that every press release has the same kind of information. More examples of things for corporate websites. So here's another screenshot on the right, just to get you thinking. So a corporate website often has a contact form, or sometimes many different contact forms for collecting information from potential customers. It probably also has some corporate branding. So at the very least, you're going to have your logo and your colors integrated into the design. And you might also have content types for things like an FAQ page, maybe places your company is listed in the media, so like media listings with links, and maybe some highlighted projects. So just another example of a corporate website. Intranet. So here's a very different kind of a website. Intranets are typically websites that aren't publicly accessible, but they're used internally by an organization. So often the content is private, and often it's not just private, but targeted at certain users. So you might have certain types of users who can see certain pages and other users can see other pages. Often there's a custom workflow for internal processes for an organization. So if your business has a workflow for, let's say, for hiring people or for making certain decisions, then that's something you could build into Drupal. Sometimes you want to have a single sign-on feature. So if employees already have some kind of login, maybe you want them to be able to use that on the intranet site. And then often when you're actually using an intranet, what you're going to see a lot of is listings of internal content, like resources for employees, a way for people to upload files for those resources and manage the versions of those files. And you'll also see things like lists of meeting notes or news for employees. And these are all things you can build with Drupal. So those listings, you would make those with views. So again, an intranet often has a lot of functionality that's customized to a specific organization. And because it often contains a lot of content, Drupal is pretty well suited for building this type of website. An online directory. So here's another example. This is if you look at the screenshot, this is an example of a course listing page for a university website. And so here we see that Drupal's good for creating content listing pages. And you might also notice that there's search tools built into this page. So because Drupal websites often have a lot of content, there's a lot of Drupal websites that have pretty advanced search interfaces. So there's a search functionality built into Drupal, and you can also add extra functionality if you need a more advanced search. Another thing you might need is embedded listings. So maybe you have some content in another site that you want to migrate into Drupal or display in Drupal. So that's something you could do. You might want to display related content, like you click on a course and you can see other courses that are similar. And you might have to have relationships between courses or between content. So again, with the university example, you might have a program that lists a bunch of related courses. Another tool that you might want to build, so here, this probably shouldn't be labeled online directory. This should be more of a custom application. So if you're building a custom application with Drupal, you might need to create forms, multi-step forms. You might have to add custom validation. You might have to integrate with other websites. And you might want to really customize the workflow for user registration. And so these are all things that you can do with Drupal, but they do take more custom development. So while a corporate website might be very easy to build with Drupal, something like a web application is going to take more work. So Drupal is a good solution for this type of website because it does have all of the content management tools that I've talked about. But for some types of websites, there is more work that you're going to have to put in to setting it up with Drupal. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind. Another example, this is the last one, it's a marketing portal. So if your organization is really trying to reach out to a lot of customers, potential clients, then you might be creating a very marketing heavy website. So beyond just a corporate website that displays information for users, you might want to be more aggressively targeting potential customers. And so in this case, your website is probably going to have a different set of features. So you might have a lot more landing pages that are designed for search engine optimization, or SEO. So this is something you can do with Drupal. Drupal has a very flexible front end, so you can customize it to make it more attractive to search engines. You can have a mixture of content and marketing materials on the site. And you can also really easily build campaign landing pages. So in the case of this website, maybe there's a certain special offer that's going on, and you could create a page for that highlights the offer, maybe has a promo video, something you can do very easily with Drupal. Okay, so I've been talking about what Drupal does, but just to give you some context, I think this is really important. Drupal is an open source tool, and it's developed and maintained by a community of developers. So Drupal's not a company or even a specific small group of people. It's really a big community of people that come together to create the software, to actually create the tool that we use called Drupal, and also to support it, to teach other people about it. And that's because Drupal is open source. So you've probably heard of that. That might be why you're looking into using Drupal. It is an open source tool, which means that the code that runs Drupal is something you can download and you can look at and you can change. So it's not like it's a company that you're paying to give you software and that's it. It's actually maintained by everyone, by a community of people. So it's not just the version of Drupal that you install once that's open source. It's actually all the code for Drupal that's open source. So that means when you first install it, that code you're gonna have, that's free. You can add it to you can create a website from that. But if you're adding other things from Drupal.org, if you're downloading a theme or if you're adding a module, all of that code from Drupal.org is also free and open source. So if you have your Drupal website and you want to add an e-commerce feature, so you add a module, that module is going to be open source too. So Drupal.org is going to be a really useful tool for you when you're looking into Drupal and also developing your website or looking for support. So this is the website where you're going to find documentation for a lot of the aspects of Drupal. You're also going to be able to find extra resources for Drupal. So for adding new functionality or changing the look and feel of your site, there's tools on Drupal.org that will help you with that. So on Drupal.org, you can download Drupal core. That's what you're going to start with. And when I say Drupal core, I mean the version of Drupal that everybody starts with. So when I showed you the demo earlier, that demo was something I ran just by downloading Drupal and installing it. And then you're going to have this base set of features called Drupal core. So Drupal core gives you a lot of really useful functionality. All those things I listed at the beginning of the webinar, things that most websites have, all of these things you can build just with Drupal core. So menus, content, setting up user accounts, taxonomy, comments, search, all of that comes with core. And actually, if you look at the files, and I don't want to scare you off by showing you code, so don't worry, I'm not gonna show you any code in this webinar, but if you actually look at the Drupal files that come from Drupal.org, there's a folder in there called core, and that's where all that core functionality lives. So once you have that core functionality that you've downloaded from Drupal.org, there's all these other things, all these other features that you might realize you need. So it's probably going to get you 90% of the way there, but you might realize that you want to add one of these features, an events calendar, e-commerce, maybe integration with LDAP or YouTube videos. And so what you're going to hear is there's a module for that. So for a lot of things, when you're kind of looking for some extra functionality, you'll often be looking for a module to help you build that functionality. So on Drupal.org, you can also download contributed modules or CONTRIB modules that give you these pieces of functionality. So by adding an extra module to your site, you're going to get those extra features. So some examples, a calendar, video player, some kind of slider or slideshow, or a ratings tool. All of those things you can get with CONTRIB modules. So sometimes you're going to have functionality that you're looking for, so you're planning out your website. And this is more the case with really customized websites, but you might be looking at features like adding integration with your company's database or HR directory, or maybe you're adding some custom validation for a certain form where you're collecting data, or you want to set up a workflow that's really customized. All these things, you might realize that those contributed modules that you downloaded don't do exactly what you want, or they don't let you integrate with your really customized data. So it's possible that you might not have a module for that. So it's not so common to run into this situation because there's thousands of Drupal websites out there, and most functionality you can think of, there's already going to be a module. But for some things, they're just too customized. And so in that case, you might be looking at adding a custom module. So that's something where you'd have to write some code, or maybe you'd have to hire someone to write some code, and then you'd have a custom module on your site as well. So when you're thinking about Drupal, you can think of these as kind of 3 layers maybe of your site. So you have all this core functionality that does most of what you need, and then you've got some extra CONTRIB modules, and then maybe you have some custom modules as well. So that gives you an idea of modules on your site. You'll also probably be looking at changing the theme of your site. So a theme is what gives you the look and feel of your site, the layout of your site. And so this is different from a module because it's just going to change the visual. So it's not going to give you any new features per se, but it will change what your website looks like. And it'll change, usually it'll change all the front end of your website. So any page that a user visits on your site. So just like with modules, there are CONTRIB themes. So there are themes that you can download from Drupal.org that change the look and feel of your site. And those are freely available. There's also some premium themes that you can download from other sites that you can pay for if you want something a little different. And so these themes are available, and they're going to change the look. So you can see from these screenshots that each one really makes the website look quite different. There are also, there's another category of themes called base themes. And these are themes that you might use if you know CSS and you know some HTML, and you want to customize what your site looks like. So in this case, you might be looking at using a base theme that gives you some kind of updated look and feel, but you're going to add your own branding with the CSS and the HTML. So if you're experienced with web development, web design, if you've made WordPress themes, then you're probably going to be really comfortable with creating a theme for Drupal based on maybe a base theme. There's also some themes called admin themes. So these are themes specifically for administering Drupal. So if you want to change what Drupal looks like on the back end, you can do that too. And finally, there's one more kind of thing that we can do with Drupal, one more kind of thing we can download from Drupal.org that might be useful for us. And these are distributions. So distributions are here to help speed up our development process. And they're mainly designed for certain use cases. So if you have a certain type of website, you might start off with a distribution. So for example, if you're making an e-commerce website, rather than just starting with Drupal, you might start with Commerce Kickstart. And this is going to help you because all the commerce modules will already be in place. There'll be some sample content there to show you how things are set up. And there'll be configuration already there for your products and other common e-commerce things. Atrium is an example of a distribution for setting up an intranet. So that might be useful for you if you have really common intranet requirements for your site. COD stands for Conference Organizing Distribution. So this is a distribution for making conference websites. And so if you have a program of speakers and you want to have user registration, this might be a good distribution to start with. And so it's going to give you all of those content types, all of those listings of content already set up. Here's one that's might be useful for us Canadians. So this is WXT, the Web Experience Toolkit distribution of Drupal, and it's used mostly by the Government of Canada. It comes with support for English and French. It comes with a lot of templates for common types of pages, and it comes with also the look and feel for the Government of Canada. So you're probably not going to use this unless you have a government website. So those are all those distributions. You can find them also on Drupal.org, and that could be a useful tool when you're starting your project. So finally, I just want to have a little note here on custom development, just to give you an idea. So if you're starting off your project and you're probably going to be using Drupal core, you're going to be downloading some modules, but you might also just want to be aware of what might be involved in customizing your website if you have really specific requirements. So often, most of the customization you're going to do on your site is going to be site building. So this is going to be going into that interface I showed you earlier and creating things like content types, a lot of views, and adding new modules, and just configuring Drupal. So just going in there, configuring a lot of the modules that I've been talking about. So there's a lot of really common modules for Drupal, like context, rules, workbench. So a lot of your work, in fact, most of your work will be doing all that configuration. And then sometimes you'll have to do some extra development. So front-end development, this would be actually creating a theme or customizing a theme. And this usually involves things like writing template files, which are mostly HTML, adding CSS and JavaScript. You might be using some themes that already exist from Drupal core or from Drupal.org contributed themes. And so if you're looking at having a really custom front end for your site and you don't want a generic theme, then these are the types of things you're going to have to do. So if you're, like I said, if you're already familiar with CSS and maybe you've used other tools like WordPress, then this is going to be really familiar to you. Backend development involves, I'd say, a lot more knowledge of Drupal. So if you're going to create some custom functionality that's really specific to your site, that those contributed modules or that Drupal core doesn't give you, it's going to involve writing some PHP code. You're going to have to learn how Drupal modules work, like what patterns they follow. And so you might have to do this if you're implementing some functionality that's specific to your organization or that maybe pulls in content from another website. And so you're also probably going to need to learn some Drupal developer tools to help you do this. So I hope that gives you a good overview of Drupal and what is possible, and also what it takes to make a Drupal website. So you can see it's mostly figuring out what you need, configuring Drupal to do what you want. Like I said, there's a lot of features that come with Drupal, but sometimes that last little percent, 10%, maybe adding the extra functionality or customizing the look and feel of your site, that takes often some extra work. So that's where you might need your CSS skills, or you might have to actually find someone to help you write the code or write it yourself. So that being said, so that leads into maybe learning more about Drupal. So there's a lot of resources, like I showed you online. There's a big community around Drupal. And we also offer Drupal training. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what types of courses we have. So there's an introduction to Drupal course, which basically takes all of what you can do with Drupal, just with configuration, and gives you an overview of that in one day. So we have a couple of courses coming up in Montreal and Ottawa for that. We also have a week-long course, a 5-day Drupal course that covers also theming and developing modules. So if you're going to be building more of a customized site, then that would be a good course to take. We also have a project management course coming up that's kind of based around Drupal in Montreal. And then if you're looking at more of the module development course, we have an online version of that course coming up in January. So mostly we do in-person trainings, but we're also scheduling some online trainings. And I'm going to send everybody who's taking this webinar, I'm going to send you all a link to these courses just so you can get an idea if that might be useful for you. So at this point, I'm going to look over to the Q&A tab. So if you have questions, we have a few minutes left. So feel free to jump in there and ask if there's anything. Oh, can single sign-on be integrated with Office 365? That is a great question. I'm not familiar with that specifically. So I'd have to look into whether there's a module for that, or again, whether that would be like a custom integration. What is the main difference between WordPress and Drupal? Oh, that's a great question. And what are the main reasons to use one over the other, or maybe some other tools? So when we started Evolving Web, it was actually we were a WordPress company. We made WordPress websites and we used Ruby on Rails. And at that time, WordPress was really mostly good for making blogs and very simple websites. So out of the box, it didn't have the same kind of content management tools that Drupal has, the ability to create different types of content, or the ability to for example, have like really extensive different types of users who can do different things on your site. So I know WordPress has changed a lot since then, but I think that Drupal still has more of these features baked into Drupal core. So the fact that you can go in and make different types of content and easily create content listings, that's something that Drupal does very well. I also think that the multilingual functionality of Drupal, especially for Drupal 8, is above and beyond what WordPress can offer, because the functionality is really built into the core of Drupal. So the way Drupal is built, it's designed to be multilingual. And on top of that, the developer community around Drupal is more developed. So there's just a lot more modules offering advanced functionality that are available for Drupal. It's a tool that's more built for developers. So the way Drupal's built, it's easier to extend. That being said, there's a much steeper learning curve. So if you're installing WordPress and just learning how to make content and manage content, I think people find WordPress easier because the functionality is a bit simpler. Whereas with Drupal, that you get a lot more options. There's a lot of checkboxes and can be confusing what they do. So it's more flexible, but that means that it can also be a bit harder to learn. And then other tools, I know there's a lot of other things out there. So if you're looking at something like Ruby on Rails, that's less of a content management system and more of a framework, then you're going to have to be doing a lot more custom development. So Drupal is nice because it does offer those content management features out of the box. Okay, there's a question about commerce being ready for Drupal 8. We haven't done any projects with commerce for Drupal 8 yet. I would not want to be one of the first people to try doing that. That being said, it looks like it's just about ready. So I think for a very simple commerce site, it would be worth trying to do it with Drupal 8. But the thing to keep in mind with any project is that there could be a lot of other modules you might want to use. So if you're looking at the commerce module, that gives you very standard commerce functionality, but for your site, you might need to have discounts on products, or you might want to integrate with a specific gateway that's not supported yet. So it's just important to do your research and to do a bit of testing before you get started. What's required in doing major or minor upgrades when Drupal announces new versions? So there's, right now, Drupal 8 is the main major version of Drupal that people are using. It's the latest version. So for most projects, if you're going to start it now, you're going to be using Drupal 8. That being said, so Drupal 7 came out about almost 6 years ago now. And so there are still a lot of Drupal 7 websites out there, and Drupal 7 is still being supported. So Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 are both options for making a new site. But in a few years, when the new version of Drupal comes out, then Drupal 7 won't be supported anymore. And between major versions of Drupal, there's always a way to upgrade. But if you have a lot of custom code that you've written, or if you've added a lot of contributed modules, those won't necessarily work for the new version. So there's often some cost in doing a major upgrade like that, because you have to update your code or you have to change your configuration. So that can be a major investment. Whereas minor versions, security updates, those tend to be relatively straightforward, and you shouldn't have to you should test for minor versions, but you typically don't have a lot of work associated with that. I'll just do one last question before we close. So can a weather station program that gathers data be integrated into Drupal? Yeah, so if you have some kind of third-party system, it is possible to integrate with Drupal. There's different ways of doing it. So you could have your website offer some kind of data feed that Drupal takes in. And you could either do that by migrating the content into Drupal. There's a tool called Migrate that you can use to create nodes, pieces of content in Drupal from another source. Or you can do it just by having taking in the feed and just displaying the content in Drupal. So that might be more appropriate if the content's being updated really regularly. So there's different ways of doing it, but it is possible. And you might have to write some custom code if you're going to take that migrate approach. So thanks everybody for attending. If I didn't get to your question, feel free to email me. I'm going to send out a follow-up email with a link to the slides and a link to the recording of this, and then also some other useful links for you. And so feel free to follow up with me after that if you have any other questions or if you're interested in the trainings or other services we offer. So thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great afternoon.